Good evening, I'm David Nicholas, and next here on CMU Public Television, Representative Joel Johnson joins us on Capitol Report.
Welcome to Capitol Report, a weekly discussion with your elected officials on the issues and concerns that affect you.
Thanks again for your company on this Tuesday evening. I'm David Nicholas, and we welcome back to our program Representative Joel Johnson, Republican from Clare in Michigan's 97th District. He's currently serving in his second term for that district. Representative, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, David. Great to be here.
As we sit down on a Friday, only a few days out and not a lot of time to review in full, but we do note that the governor presented the budget proposal formally to the appropriations committees this week. So far, any reaction to what you've seen either in some of the specifics or the overall outline of that plan?
David, the overall, I mean, we have a great thing to work with the fact that we have more money than we've had in the past, and puts us in a position to look at some things in a different manner, and we're happy for that. And always happy to see the governor's recommendations. Of course, we'll flesh those out over the next few months, and we'll have some suggestions to maybe change some things, and some things we'll be terrific with. But so it's a big process. We're happy to be starting it. Was happy to see that we are in a position to work with education and provide more K-12 funding. And one of the areas that I've been working on since I've been in office is foundation grant equity. And we're still a ways off on that, but we do, with the governor's recommendations, we would become a little closer yet. The other thing, in addition to raising the foundation grant funding, I believe it was $111, his recommendation for the lowest funded schools, $83, I believe, for the highest funded schools. But in addition to that, we will increase our contribution to the retirement fund for school employees. And I think this is very, very important. There is a great need to make sure that that fund is kept solvent and in a situation there that we can truly fulfill the obligations to those great school employees who have retired and will retire. So this is very important, and I'm glad that the state is able to step up and do that, because that contribution by the schools was going up in an astronomical fashion. Now we're able to limit that to, I think it's about 20.9% of their wages is now going to be in their contribution to MIPSers. Without this program, they would probably be near 40% now. So that is a big deal, and we're really happy to be able to do that.
Already some criticism, some scrutiny, as one might expect, especially in an election year going into one, on some of those numbers. And I wonder how much more we can clarify, because what was being touted in the ad that started rolling out, and some of the talk around the time of the Super Bowl, the formal re-election kickoff, was that amount of education funding that the governor was saying that has gone up, and critics, the opposition from the MEA and others, saying no, not to that level, and how we interpret those numbers. You have kind of explained that in terms of amounts going to the retirement pension. How does that break down? I wonder how much, I'm not saying you didn't explain it, but how can we explain that further? Because I think there is some confusion there.
There is, and in the past, the state funding pretty much all came through the foundation grant. It was very easy to keep track of it that way. But it does make sense that we protect the schools even further by putting a limit on how much money they're having to put into their retirement system. And so we felt that was more important to do that. You know, it's just like if you worked for an employer and the employer said, you know, hey, I'm only going to give you a raise of this much in your check, but I'm going to pay your mortgage for you. You'd be happy with that, right? that means that you have money that you can use in other places.
But by that, and putting the terms on the same page, when you say foundation grant, for those that aren't picking up on that, perhaps, when we talk about the 7,500 per student or 97, wherever that number happens to be, what you're saying is that the past formula meant that that amount per child in the school, then all of that then had to be kind of split into those different areas? Is that what you understand?
And part of that foundation grant did go to paying the retirement system for that school. Now, and now still some of that will, but it's going to be limited to 20.9% of the wages that the school puts out. This is a way that it actually protects the employees better than if you did it all as a foundation grant per student. Our foundation grant per student has increased quite a bit over the last 3 years, and our overall K-12 spending is way more than it has ever been in the past. So we're really happy to be able to do that. I can't tell you exactly what the figure is, but I believe it's a little over $1 billion more than it was 3 years ago for the K-12 funding. So we feel that we are providing opportunities for our schools. Now, one issue that we have is that the federal ARA money did go away. We knew that was going to go away, but that created a big hole, and as a state, we're trying to fill that hole. And so I still understand where schools can say, wow, we still don't have as much money as we'd like to have to work with, and we had more at one time. Well, we've actually, I believe we've pretty much filled that hole at this point, but it's still tight because other expenses go up. One of the big expenses for schools in our area is fuel. And
well, this winter certainly hasn't been kind on that front.
That has not helped them this winter, and that's a big expense that we hope that we can help them alleviate some of those problems.
We've spoken about this many times, and your district is not alone in this. Many that we see in central and northern Michigan at that lower end, or sometimes right at the bottom of that range of the per pupil funding, regardless of how the formula is broken down. Is this a step then more in a better direction than you think, in terms of equalizing some of that out so that the students in some of our smaller districts in portions of the state in the end will have more going to the actual education effort in the classroom?
That's the hope, and of course, David, I would like to see more going to those lowest funded schools, and I believe that those schools are the ones that really need the help at this time. It doesn't make sense for a school who receives quite a bit lower funding per student to be able to be held to the same requirements as any other school, and I really believe that we need to try and make even bigger steps toward equity in that foundation grant.
Another form of equity, as it were, in terms of the flexibility too, and how our students learn. You've been one of the advocates for flexibility in the curriculum, and if we look at the curriculum overall, through the period of the dictates that came from former Governor Granholm and the merit curriculum that was laid out, and now what we see coming down from the federal level in terms of Common Core, are we losing local control and perhaps not serving all of our students in the way we should? And how are your direct efforts to maintaining perhaps that level of that control so that we can address the needs specifically for some of our students in some of the areas that we have?
Well, yes, David, that is a big concern. And Ed McBroom and I have worked very closely on a couple of bills. We've worked with folks from various industries as well, and we've talked about what can we do to provide flexibility in this merit curriculum without gutting it and without, as some say, dumbing down the curriculum. And our concern is that so much of the time that our students don't have time to take a career technical program. It takes about 6 credits. It does take 6 credits to do most career technical education programs. And there's about 6 credits available to students if they pass everything as they should, if they don't want to take an art class, if they don't want to take band, but we want to allow our students to do those sorts of things. That's what makes each student a little different, is those opportunities. And if a student has to repeat a class, there's no time to do that. My issue is that I truly believe that many of our students will be so much better motivated by being able to get their hands on something and to learn a skill, whether it's nursing, welding, building trades, auto mechanics. There are so many opportunities available for them out there, and there are good jobs in those fields. So they could go to work right out of high school or with a little bit more training, and they would have excellent jobs in those positions. We have industry that's waiting for more employees that fit those bills. The other thing that they learn by taking these career technical education programs are the soft skills that are just involved with employment. And they learn the fact that you better show up on time or you're going to be in trouble. You better plan on working every day or you're going to be in trouble. Some of those things, you know, it seemed like we learned those growing up in the past, but it's a little tougher today. And, you know, I mentioned to the governor a couple weeks ago, I said, you know, we're really looking at the difference of these students coming out of high school, maybe getting a little more training and getting an excellent job, or going on assistance. For some of the students, it's really just that simple. And we really need to provide that flexibility in the program. If they decide later on that they want to go on and get a 4-year degree, they can still do that. And they can, you know, if they need to take an extra foreign language class at college or an extra algebra class, something a little more specialized, they can do that. But if you don't motivate them in high school, and if they get to a point where they say, this is not for me, I'm out of here, then we've lost. And that's, you know, that's a big issue to me. And that's a signature issue for me. And if we can't get this, I'm going to be very, very disappointed.
You reminded me as we sat down that it is a pair of bills that you and UP lawmaker Ed McBroom got through the House, currently held up in the Senate. And the further question, though, is it's one thing to take on or to work at ways to adjust the merit curriculum that was in place in the state, but what about Common Core? Does this legislation stand a greater challenge of passing through that when you have something that's being implemented on everybody? How much teeth will you have in this?
Well, we believe that this still gives us the flexibility that we're looking for. However, as Common Core gets further and further entrenched, and if they start accepting more areas of the Common Core, right now it's mathematics and language arts. But as you know, if they continue to accept and require more and more of that, then it gets to be even a bigger problem. And that's where I think we really need to be proactive on this.
We have spoken often, again, about some of the very specific things in the central and northern Michigan area, your district included, economic problems that we face. In light of that, and with the federal debate now over things like long-term unemployment and some proposals that have been going around Lansing on how we might restructure workforce development programs, what does it mean for the long-term unemployed in District 97, some of the areas that you identify with, and dealing with that overall issue we've seen with generational poverty?
Well, the workforce training is a great piece, and doing more with our community colleges. You know, our universities are great, but for a lot of our local residents, the community college works out really nicely, and they have a lot of opportunities there. And our community colleges have done things to develop workforce training for the industry that's in our areas. And that's very special and very important. For instance, we have the Plastics Technologies program at Mid-Michigan Community College. And so it's very important that we, particularly as we have veterans coming home and veterans who have been home, and we need to take those opportunities to train them in skills that do have jobs available. And so I'm very happy to see some expansion of those workforce development programs.
Do you think it's enough? And I ask that in the context of we've come through a first term with this governor running for reelection, and how things apply to this part of the state. This has always been an issue that a lot of times people in the central and northern counties wonder if any governor from either party, if they are a downstater, as it were, is enough attention being paid to the very unique characteristics of what goes on here. So when we look at economic issues, paths to economic development, paths to working to restructure the economy, is there any thought that it's one size fits all that's supposed to be implemented and replicated in any area of the state, or do you see enough flexibility being given to local areas to make these plans work and to take into account what makes us, us?
And I do see more development toward looking at each area individually, and we do have quite a bit of input on what goes on. We certainly have a smaller number of representatives and senators from north of M46 than we do south of M46, and we do deal with that. Sometimes it's a little tougher, but those of us in that area do work together in a strong manner to make sure that our voice is heard. And so we've been able to find some improvements for our area, but it's a struggle. We'll continue to work with that.
As we sit down today, the president is on the ground in Michigan signing the Farm Bill. As a member of the Ag Committee and based on the voices that you hear from the farmers in your district, a very large, complex piece of legislation, but in general, what has the reception been so far to its passage and now moving forward?
Well, I'll tell you, speaking to farmers, they are happy to see something moving forward. There are a lot of folks concerned about some of the things that are included in here. They feel that entitlement programs should be kept separate from the Farm Bill, and that we could move to a much more market-based program than what we're really ultimately seeing maybe in this Farm Bill. So we'll continue to have input.
The farmers
as things
say
go
this.
along. Even the farmers are saying that.
Because there was a piece that ran on NPR this week as the Senate was getting ready to take their vote, and it said that the Farm Bill has grown into something much more complex and somewhat unwieldy than its original intent back at the time of the Great Depression. Change being given what it was, and I'm curious to hear that coming from the farmers that they want their issues and concerns addressed, but are we to infer then that they're saying that with these other things that have been rolled into it, that it gets in the way of simply letting farmers do what they do?
I've heard that from a lot of farmers as well. Yeah, and non-farmers are just kind of beside themselves trying to understand the whole thing, and so it's tough.
You were one of the signees for a letter that went out near the end of last month to the EPA, the message to keep the corn and ethanol numbers at the same level when we look at things for the renewable fuel standards. There was a comment period that was ending near the end of January, and that will play itself out. State corn growers seem to be in favor of it. Is this on balance then a good thing when we look at ethanol, renewable fuels, and all of that?
I think it is. We've developed an ethanol system here in the state and other parts of the country that is somewhat dependent on the requirements. Most of the petroleum people are also fairly happy with those requirements because they can raise octane with the ethanol, and it also is helping the environment with keeping emissions down. So to have something that our ethanol providers can sort of have to shoot at, and to move us to a little bit less requirement on those foreign countries for our oil, I think this is the right direction at this time.
With the attention being paid to it, excuse me, are we in better balance than maybe we were earlier on in this development when we look at the balance between food, feed, and fuel? When there's only so many acres, so many farmers, and so much corn that can be grown.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing to that, David, is that as a feed manufacturer and supplier in the past, I used distillers grains quite extensively, particularly for dairy feeds. And it is a very good feed, and it's the byproduct that comes out of this process. So it's not as if you're going to get ethanol and everything else is thrown away. You come out with a very high quality product that makes excellent animal feed out of that. So I think it balances the whole, everybody's needs here.
Good that we had your immediate perspective to help sort it out, because probably not many others would have been able to do that then. Looking a little bit more into the overall budget numbers, and you alluded to the fact that with the extra amount of the surplus, we can look at things like roads, schools, the tax cut proposal that's there, the rainy day fund. What are people telling you as far as, there's the one side that says it's all the taxpayers' money, there's others that would like to spend down every penny. Where do you think some of those priorities should be for that nearly $1 billion we're talking about?
Well, David, I think we really need to look at the road funding, and the $1 billion that's talked about is over a 3-year period of time, so it's not as if we have all of that right now. But roads are an issue. After this winter, roads are going to be even more of an issue, I believe. So, you know, we need to be very careful that our road money is being spent wisely. And I think we need to be a little more proactive on that, so that we're prioritizing on a statewide basis, not just saying, well, our federal highways are going to get this, state that, but let's look at the whole thing. And if we have problems with county roads that need more addressing than the federal highways or the state highways, then let's try and get more of our money to those and help out there. So, you know, I think we need to see more of a working together of our whole transportation system in Michigan, as opposed to in those certain tight boxes as to where it's going right now. So, but anyway, I really think that transportation funding is a really good place to look at for some of this. And of course, we do want to increase that rainy day fund. I'm a great proponent of decreasing taxes, but at this point in time, I think we've been working hard to try and come up with road funding, and I'm not one who would want to vote for, in fact, I don't intend to vote for increased gas taxes or increased registration fees. So, you know, if we still want to come up with $1 billion this year for roads, then we better figure out where it's coming from. And so that means some other cuts. It means probably not sending a few dollars back to our tax.
Well, when you say a few dollars, I think that's worth pointing to. We would all, as any taxpayer, like some of that money back, but numbers people tell me that even $1 billion spread out is not going to make a real significant dent, even with the range that the governor's talking about of certain economic ranges that might get the majority of that. So does it make more? I mean, the request originally last year was for 1.2 per year on the roads over 10 years, and right now we can't project that with only this current budget surplus. So the roads, you feel, would be the best priority for spending that money?
I believe so.
Anything that you go into this current year with that you would call unfinished business from anything that was left on the table in 2013, or particular priorities then outside of some of these areas that we've talked out, or maybe somewhat joined to those, but as it's still early in the term and now the budget is taking its shape and so forth, the business that you'd like to see addressed here?
We've already talked about my biggest priority, and that's the education flexibility for our skilled trades training. That's the one thing that if we can't get done, I will be severely upset. But we've got other issues that we're working on as well, and we'll continue to work on those. One of those is concealed weapon carrying opportunities in pistol-free zones for our corrections employees. Those folks put their lives on the line every day, and they're they're dealing with some pretty rough customers. And they and their families have been threatened, and we've seen situations in other states, particularly where some of those folks have been killed. And to tell them that, you know, hey, when you go into these certain areas, we know you've got a lot of training on weapons and so forth, but you can't carry a gun. I think there's something wrong there.
Now, is that what dates from, I had in my notes, roughly October of last year?
Yes.
That, and so where does that currently stand in terms of how it's progressed and moving
I
forward?
believe that is waiting for further hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's been through the House, and it's waiting over there.
How do you think we are going into, there's always the incentive, I'm sure now we've seen in the last couple of years, but given the campaign year and so forth, to getting the budget deal done by that projected goal of June 1, you think we'll be on target to do that?
I think we will. I think we will. There will be some extreme sessions in getting things together. I've made a list. I still have further to go through that budget document, but I've got a list of things that I differ on and want further explanation on. And I'm sure we've got 110 members in the House doing the same thing, and 38 in the Senate. So so it's gonna be some longer work sessions and that sort of thing. But our intent is to have it done.
Plenty to consider, even more than the notes I generated for today. So good luck as that work moves forward, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, David.
Thank you, too, for tuning in with us here once again on Capitol Report. Our guest has been State Representative Joel Johnson of the 97th District. Remember, this program, again, will be repeated tonight at 2 a.m. in our overnight rotation, and soon, along with the programs so far in this 2014 year, posted to our website, WCMU.org, and click on the TV and local productions pages, and you'll find that page directly for this program right there. For all of us here, Chris Ogazali and the technical crew, I'm David Nicholas. Thanks again for being with us, and we'll talk again.
You've been watching Capitol Report. Join us again as your elected officials speak to your concerns on current issues.